another initiative from the Biden administration. You wrote a pretty fiery dish last week, so I wanted to really talk about it since it really seemed like it got you worked up a bit. And that's on the administration's supply chain policy. Would you just start by defining what the supply chain policy is? And I know that's a little bit of a leading question because I remember your introduction from last week. But what's their intent with this policy?
There is no polite way for me to answer that question. So here, let me try. So there is the idea. First of all, what is the supply chain? Right? You make a good or service, and a supply chain is nothing but a bunch of contracts to acquire the necessary inputs to produce that good and service and sell it to your customers. And if you think about it, that means you, a private entity, are making these private contracts with other private entities to acquire stuff and at prices that you negotiate. And the government really doesn't have a natural role there. That's why the dish got so fiery. Why are they pretending that they are managing the entire economy from the West Wing of the White House? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how the U.S. economy works. And so you can have a tax policy, and it could affect the supply chain. We have trade policies, and we know that has affected the supply chain. You can have safety and health regulations, and that would affect your suppliers and you and all that. But there isn't a policy that makes any sense with respect to supply chains in general. Nevertheless, they launched into this 100-day review of supply chains and then issued a bunch of policy recommendations. And it was the fact that I felt they were in an area they didn't belong, right? That's philosophically, this is not the government's role. And the things they were saying didn't make a lot of sense to me. So, first sentence of this executive order says, we want to create good paying union jobs. What does unionization have to do with dealing with short-term disruptions in the supply chain, which is ostensibly the goal of this nothing. So they're using this as a vehicle for other things, right? So they're going to set up public-private consortiums to produce medicines. Well, that's not supply chain. That's nationalizing part of essential medicines. Now, if you want to do that, say we like to nationalize essential medicines, be honest about it, move on. They want to use the Export-Import Bank to finance domestic infrastructure. Okay, now tell me what that has to do with short-term disruptions in private entities' supply chains. Nothing. And it goes on, right? It's a series of things, including a trade, what would they call it, a strike force to find those situations where government subsidies in other countries have disrupted supply chains. At the same time, they're proposing, by the way, to do government subsidies to create infrastructure. So it's rich in irony, and it makes no sense. And so I question the whole enterprise because it looks like the classic Rahm Emanuel of using an emergency as an opportunity to get something done. And I'm not sure I agree with all the things they want to do, and I certainly don't like the way it was presented.